I don't hear anything.
What a disappointment. What a gem.
Oh, guess what? We don't have any audio, do we?
Oh, we're going to do it ourselves?
So just keep going.
All right.
No music.
So we
No
have
music.
Not
Oh,
me. I'm not the first one to go. It's
I'm waiting for my dance, and then all right.
Oh my fucking god!
Jesus. Welcome back to Come and Brew It Radio, coming to you from Texas Brewing Inc. in Haltom City,
So
Texas.
we're doing this, or
You can find us on the web at txbrewing.com, and be sure to follow us on Facebook and share with all your friends.
tonight we're going to focus on the American Lager and Light Lager BJCP categories 1A and 1B. We know these are styles that are easy to poke fun at. However, it's hard not to recognize the skill it takes to make a beer that light. With little room for error, the big boys have figured out a way to make these lawnmower beers taste exactly the same, no matter where they're brewed. We've got a selection of the mass-produced American beers to discuss, plus we'll be sampling some local interpretations of the style, as well as some style variants. So grab a tall boy and kick up your feet.
Before we get started, please be sure to check out our Patreon account to help support the show. Every little bit counts, and if you visit patreon.com/Come and Brew It Radio, we have a variety of options for you to help keep the show going, get involved, and improve it. At the end of each month, we'll be doing a monthly product giveaway for $5, $10, and $20 patrons. I'm Nigel.
I'm Brandon.
I'm Stubby.
Who are we?
Michael.
I'm Mikey B.
I'm Sandra.
And Eric's over there, too.
Welcome.
Eric's over
in
there
there.
too, yeah.
Yeah. Everything
So-
sounds really weird without music. So
Yeah, I
It's
don't know.
really
man.
weird, yeah.
Well, I don't know if I can work in these conditions.
Well, I said that already.
Yeah. Well, I'm agreeing with you. Yeah. So I guess we'll start off by saying sorry that we have been out a little bit. We've missed a week or two here or there, and obviously a real rough start tonight. We've got a lot of things going on around here that have caused some difficulties for us, and we're trying real hard to get things back to normal. So we appreciate you kind of bearing with us as we get our feet under us, both in a technical and a personal.
Yeah,
manner
one of the
around
things
here,
is
so.
getting music to play when you start a podcast.
Yeah.
That's one of the things.
So I don't know if the music was playing and we just couldn't hear it, or
Well,
Well-
it was playing on the machine somewhere. In there somewhere.
Somewhere in the universe.
can the people
I'm
hear
not
it?
sh-
Or
I'm not sure that the people
What-
could hear
what
it.
people?
I don't know.
So
the people are the most.
We have
important.
people?
we stayed up here late the other night, tried to really hone in on our sound a little bit better, so we have a little bit better quality audio. But
I do think the audio quality sounds better.
Yeah.
So we came in and we worked on it a lot and tried to
Just screwed the music
to
up.
make it fixed, and then we forgot to put the music back in, evidently.
Yeah, back in the mix.
Well,
Anyway,
what is it
so-
they say? We'll fix it in post.
Yes, we'll
There you
fix that in post.
Yeah.
But you guys for live,
Add that to
sorry.
your list. It's going to be a long list before the end of the night.
Yeah, so
Get a legal pad.
evidently it didn't do the title on the live feed either. It just says test.
Right now?
Yeah.
No,
this,
before.
this whole episode is a test.
Yeah.
I think that may be another test.
Oh, maybe
Oh.
another.
We
test.
did a lot of tests.
Did we do a lot of tests?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
and
Okay.
as you could tell already, it worked, right?
Yeah, but I don't see anything live right now, so maybe it's
Well,
not live.
maybe it's better that way.
Oh, it's live.
Yeah.
Trust me,
it,
it's live.
it is live.
Yeah, it's
okay.
live. Oh, you're live.
Well, we'll see.
Okay.
Is this Run DMC?
Yes, but
Yes.
you're correct,
Is it
Stubby.
live?
It just
Is it-
it
is
says test.
Yeah. So evidently.
Well,
yeah.
that's a different one. I think that's the one that said goes.
It's the one that's live right now,
Is it?
Well, that's
We're,
ridiculous.
we're live testing.
or maybe not. No, that one.
I
Looks
think
like
I
it
can
stopped.
give you the results of the test.
It might change after we. What's the results of the
It
test,
failed.
Brandon?
We failed.
Yes.
We got a 40.
Yeah.
F plus.
Yeah, not live.
That's right.
All right. Well,
All right. That's all right. We're gonna soldier
we'll
on
see
here.
you later.
We
Good
actually
night.
we do have a lot to talk about tonight. We got some good brewing experiments. I think we got 3 different ones here that we're going to taste and talk about, which should be really nice. And actually, I'm really looking forward to talking about the American lagers and light lagers. I think this is a
Yeah.
subject that gets skipped over a lot. I really have a newfound respect for it after Mikey's incredibly good Mikey Light that he brewed recently.
Thank you.
I don't think.
We've talked-
Did we have that on the show before?
Yeah, we've
I
talked
think
about-
I missed
yeah.
that show, right?
We've talked about it on the air.
Yeah,
We've had
okay.
it on the air.
Really, truly impressive beer, and it's kind of renewed my interest in it. So.
I have some of the next batch.
Do you? Okay,
It's,
okay.
it's a little green, and we'll discuss that. But
So we're going to get that in the second half. We'll go ahead and start off with our recent happenings with something that I really, really enjoyed reading about.
And speaking of light beers.
Yeah, speaking of light beer, so Coors Light, the lit tap handle. The press release notes consumers are tired of hearing about the corn syrup controversy and would rather focus on the beer. Except this campaign to refresh the beer wars conversation just furthers the spat. Here's how it works. Bars in selected cities, New York, Philadelphia, Dallas, Omaha, and Las Vegas, around the country can install specially designed Coors Light tap handles that light up whenever Bud Light attacks Coors on social media or broadcast media. When the tap handle lights up, the whole bar receives a free round of Coors Light. So in effect, it continues to keep consumers focused on which brewery said what on social media.
And I read it, and I just cracked up. I thought, well, that's just genius. You know, oh, you're going to slam our beer? Well, we're going to give it away.
I love the WWE nature of this whole thing that started at the Super Bowl. And if I were Budweiser, I was telling Mikey before the show, if I were Budweiser, as soon as I knew these were in place, every 5 minutes I would be putting out a negative tweet for a week.
Yeah, let them give free beer away.
And let them just give away
time.
all their beer and
So-
just see how much they're willing to give away.
So who's the mean Gene Okerlund of the beer world?
That's a good question. I guess that remains to be seen. Huh?
Okay.
I'm more interested to find out who the Hulk Hogan is.
Well, no. I don't know. These days, it's probably not a good thing.
We live in a world with no more Spuds McKenzie or anything like that anymore. We don't have any of these cool
No,
beer
you have
mascots.
Dilly Dilly, dude.
The Dilly Dilly, yeah.
I
that's
did
true.
see. There's a brewery that's put out a video with the catches "Silly Silly." Don't be silly, silly. It's
Ooh, somebody got a
Will you say that again?
C&D about that.
It's
Oh, well, no, they did a beer called Dilly Dilly. That's what it was.
okay.
Yeah, and Budweiser sent in a town crier to read off their cease and desist.
That's
Yeah,
worth it
I
right
think-
there.
right. That's right.
Yeah.
They
no.
made a commercial, or there was a
It was on
a viral
Instagram or
video,
something.
yeah, something that yeah.
They were very, very. Both sides were very amicable about it.
Yeah,
you know.
the whole thing's a big joke. So yeah,
Yeah. It's based on that end. I mean,
but I just love to see it escalate here. When the Super Bowl commercials were happening, I thought, yes, I love this.
Instead of talking about brewing it the hard way, they're
Right.
talking shit about
Let them
corn
go
syrup.
after each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I
yeah.
think
Instead of knocking the little guys that you keep buying up, and knocking,
Right.
you know, home brewers, just go after each other. Go for each other's throats,
Yeah.
and let us, you know, soak
well,
up the
at
mess.
the end of the day, you're never gonna convert a craft beer drinker back to Coors or Miller
No, you're right about
because you're
that, yeah.
talking shit.
Right.
You know, that makes them even more mad. And I think actually that probably brought up even more animosity from the craft beer people, to where they were like, man, those guys kiss my ass so much so that it created some waves even in their own marketing. So I think they probably went back to the drawing board and goes, well, let's just go after the guys that still drink the same kind of beer we make, maybe.
Yeah.
Well, what was funny about it too is it's just like the pumpkin peach commercial that they did a couple of years ago, where they were the only ones who actually brewed a pumpkin peach beer. Was it 10 Barrel or Elysian or something like
Elysian,
that? Elysian, yeah, and they owned them. Well, to that same effect, Budweiser or AB InBev brews something like 57 different beers made with corn syrup. Bud Light's not made with it. Budweiser's not made with it, but they
The
brew a
others
bunch
are.
of different beers
Yeah.
that are made with corn syrup.
But don't worry about the facts.
Well, what
Right.
I,
Yeah, never let the facts get in the way of a good.
But there was also the ulterior directive as well, because it was about putting the ingredients on the box, right? So
Right.
that takes it back to affecting the craft brewery scene.
That's the part that I think has
Yeah.
the potential to be a little nefarious.
Yeah.
We'll see. We'll see.
See, what I found funny about it all is I drive past Miller every day on my way into the shop, and there's a billboard right across from Miller Brewery on I-35 that's a Budweiser that's basically like, yeah, we don't use corn syrup. And it's one of those, like, so they even took it as far as like billboards to help push
I
the
love it.
message. Like,
I love
yeah,
it.
it's
I hope it keeps escalating and escalating and just gets way out of hand. I love it.
Oh, I'm sure it will.
Yeah.
And I mean,
I want to see
Sure.
the CEOs of the two companies wrestle naked in mud to the death.
We only use reverse osmosis water.
see that's the great thing about tonight's episode. We're gonna be able to tell how much that corn sugar jacks up a beer, because we have both a Bud Light
we've
and
got
a
corn
Miller
and,
Light.
we got corn and rice.
So yeah,
Yeah.
So at any rate, I just find that endlessly amusing.
Yeah. Well, and Nigel found Brewers Association released their list of top 50 craft breweries based on sales. It's a pretty interesting list. I didn't bring the whole list. I've got the top 5, then a few notables that we've talked about here.
Yeah, I'm going to try and bring it up.
Nigel's trying to look for it. But Yuengling, oldest craft brewery or oldest brewery in the nation, at number 1. Not terribly surprising, except that we can't get their beer here.
Wow, you know what? I don't think that's always been the case. I think Boston Beer Company was bigger.
I think
Well, they weren't allowed to be included in this list before because their beers were brewed with adjuncts and those didn't count. And then a couple
maybe that's
years
what it
ago,
is.
they changed it where you could include adjunct beers, and
We talked
Yuengling
about-
was immediately number 1.
Yeah.
So a slight change in the vocab here. It's actually top 50 brewing companies and
Brewing
not
companies.
and not
Okay.
breweries.
Okay. Then that makes a little bit more sense. Number 2, Boston Beer Company, so Sam Adams. Number 3, Sierra Nevada. Number 4, New Belgium. Number 5 was a big of a shock there.
Duvel, Margot.
Duvel.
It's because they've been buying everybody.
Yeah,
They're
they own a
buying
bunch
out.
of people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like Ommegang and all those.
And there were a couple of those conglomerates on the list. I didn't include those. But some of the notables that we've talked about, Bell's at 7, Stone at 9, Dogfish 13, New Glarus 16.
Wow.
Pretty big.
That says something about how much beer they drink in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're the 16th largest brewery and you don't export anything.
What's the population of Wisconsin?
I don't know, but I'll tell you what though, every little, even little dive bars you go into, man, they have spotted cow on tap, man.
Well, Uinta from
Okay, so
a
there's
very
less
weird state.
there's less people in Wisconsin than in Dallas-Fort Worth.
No, I
There you
believe
go.
that.
Yeah. And you're the
And that brewery that
16th.
only distributes to Wisconsin is number 16 in sales.
So from a Texas standpoint, Gambrinus is at number 6. They have Shiner, I believe. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
Shiner.
Shiner,
Yeah.
amongst others. They're also in Berkeley and in Portland.
right.
And Kanarky are number 8, and they have Deep Ellum
Deep Ellum.
Deep
yeah.
Ellum, yeah.
and a bunch of others, Oscar Blues, etc., etc. Right?
Yeah.
Oscar
So-
Blues.
But St. Arnold number 48 being independent.
Right.
So, I wonder.
well, I mean, but Bell's at number 7's independent, Stone's independent.
Yeah,
Sierra
I'm
Right,
surprised
right,
to
but,
see Bell's up there at number 7. That's
that
pretty
really-
impressive.
Yeah,
Well,
that
they've-
surprised me too.
They've done a pretty widespread distribution now.
I think the Two Hearted Ale has been ranked the number 1 beer the last couple of years.
I'll tell you, if I was pressed to give an answer, that would be my favorite IPA, I think.
Just like
I-
West Coast type.
So
Man, I
yeah,
had
very
it,
solid.
and it tasted like Pez. Pez
Then
candy.
it was just old.
So they also list the top
I have
50
gotten a lot of old
overall.
ones here.
So that was the top 50 craft. This is the top 50 overall. No surprise. AB's number 1, Miller Coors number 2, Constellation's number 3, Heineken number 4. Then it gets into Pabst is 5, and then at number 6 is the largest craft, which is obviously Yuengling.
That's amazing. Pabst was number 5, and they don't even own their own brewery.
Yeah, it's all brewed by Miller.
Miller, yeah.
But it's one of those, Constellation, Heineken, they own craft too. So, I mean,
Yeah, they
some
do.
of those are,
You're-
are
you're-
craft
you're-
sales.
It's a pretty small part of what they do. though.
Well, yeah, it's true.
Yeah,
I don't know that they paid a ton of money for Ballast Point.
yeah, they did.
Well,
Yeah, I
That's
think
true.
they're regretting that decision.
Yeah.
Speaking of, it was Constellation that brought out Four Corners.
I believe it was, yeah.
Yeah, I
Yes.
think you're right.
I also saw this week that the cans with the
They're cans,
full
yeah.
lid,
Yes.
they're being withdrawn as well.
Did they actually say why? I didn't read that article.
Something to do with the supplier more than the.
well, the supplier
takeover.
said that we looked at this earlier today at the shop. The supplier said there's not a lot of market for them, and the environmental impact of it's the same thing that goes back to pop tops. We don't have pop tops anymore because of the waste, and so those were just large pop tops.
I don't understand the waste part, but
Yeah, man, you can turn those things into
the
shooters.
whole thing's aluminum.
I didn't waste it at all.
Right, but remember the old pop top cans? We don't have
Yeah.
pop top cans anymore
Pop
because
a
of
top again. Oh, wait.
You know, the one
Yeah.
where you pull the
But
actual,
the whole top is recyclable, just like the.
So are the pop top cans.
Yeah, but they
Yeah.
get thrown around
They
on the
get-
beach.
they get thrown
and all that
around.
Kind of crap, you know?
They're not
cut
get-
your
Death
what did you
Stars.
Oh, so
cut your
just the
foot on
fact
a
that
pop
it
top?
detaches
It
completely.
detaches
Yeah,
completely.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, okay,
It
okay.
becomes
Kicked
two
off my
separate
flip flop
pieces.
and stepped on a pop top or something.
We actually have two of the
Isn't that a Kanye West song?
It is.
Yes.
Yes.
Don't know her.
but we do have some Four Corners beer with the old school.
I like
with
those
their
cans,
original.
man.
I
cans,
thought
like-
those were great. And then our last recent happening, which also kind of ties into craft and buying up, Anchor employees voted to unionize. They got bought out in 15, I believe, by Sapporo.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And apparently,
Was that 1915?
apparently they were cutting
18?
back their hours to below full time. They're only letting them go 32 hours, which means they didn't have to pay them full time benefits. They were looking for better hours. They were looking for better benefits. So they unionized, and then there's an Anchor-owned bar, I guess, across the street that is voting in the next couple weeks. And
Oh.
oh man,
Oh, it's a gusher.
Nigel is sharing beer with the floor. Is that your light beer?
Was that brewed with corn syrup?
Is it brewed with corn syrup or rice? Did you brew it the hard way? Yes. Okay.
Was it Beechwood aged? That's all we really need to know.
Was it cold lagered?
Is it cold lagered?
Yes, it was.
So yeah, I mean, and I find it completely different from when I went to Anchor many years ago when Fritz Maytag owned it. I think the brewers, the employees there loved it. The rules were so relaxed, and it was, you were one of 50 employees there total, so they really enjoyed their jobs, and then with the buyouts, a lot of things tend to happen. So, good for
Are
those
you
employees.
kidding me? They say nothing's going to
That
change.
never changed. Yeah.
Nothing changes.
That's not what
So-
Sapporo said.
Yeah. Anybody do any homebrew work this week?
Yeah, so I did a couple of things. One of the things I had been struggling with on my brew stand, I've got the two burners, and then the way it came from the way I bought it from you, each burner has its own hose and regulator. And I had a splitter on my propane tank that split it off into two, and that's how I've used it for years. Well, that splitter for some reason went bad. I don't know how, and so I decided to plumb my stand where I could just have the one regulator go down to like a black iron manifold out to some
Right.
flex tubes up to my. Well, I learned a really tough lesson of having to screw around with this thing, and I'll just pass along the knowledge that I learned. So the orifices that come off of your burners, they're a 3/8 flare fitting, and flare means that it's got that rounded kind of tapered end to it, and it doesn't seal at the threads. It seals at when that taper hits against another taper on the inside.
It's just like
So-
a MFL fitting.
Right, so it's one of the reasons you never want. Yeah, exactly like the MFL fittings that are on the end of your ball lock couplers,
Right.
and that's the reason you don't want to put Teflon tape on there, because it's not sealing at the threads; it's sealing at that flare. Well, the flex hoses that I could find all had 1/2-inch fittings, and they came with a little flare fitting that screwed on there, and then a threaded piece that came off the end, and that piece was threaded on the inside. And so I just screwed the orifices into those pieces, and I was having all kinds of problems. I went to brew. Chris and I were going to brew, and I was out there screwing around with that thing for an hour trying to get it to work right. You could light the burners. They'd be nice, strong flames, and then they would just die off and go out. Eventually, I had to take the whole thing apart and just hook up my regulators straight and use two different propane tanks. So I finally I got some adapters that are a 3/8 flare to a 1/2-inch flare, and I put those on, and that fixed the problem. So the lesson is, if you have a flare fitting on anything, don't ever hook it up to any other type of fitting than a flare fitting, because it doesn't work. And I had pipe dope on there. I had a bunch of Teflon tape. I would have really thought that it would have sealed well. Apparently, it does not seal
Right.
nearly well enough.
And that's a common problem too. Even with those big regulators, those big 30 psi regulators, a lot of times people don't realize that. I mean, if you have like a 5 psi regulator, you can just turn that bitch on full blast and turn the tank on. You're probably not going to have any problems. But when you've got the big 30 psi problem, regulators, a lot of times we have them come back all the time, and the reason being is because you got that pressure release valve that's on your propane tank, right? And the deal is it's built to, if you all of a sudden have a big no back pressure at all, on your tank, it'll actually slow the gas from coming out. So a lot of times what people do is they'll go in there and they'll turn that regulator on real fast, real quickly, and then it'll just kind of the gas will just barely come out, and you have a little tiny flame, or
I'm not sure that was the problem in this case, because
no, I'm not saying that, but
yeah.
I'm just saying that is
That's
a
a
common
common
problem
Okay.
that people have. Just kind of to add to that conversation, but the main thing is if you do that, turn your regulator all the way off, and then slowly turn your tank on, and then slowly turn your regulator on all the way.
Yeah, don't go all the way
Yeah.
open and then back it off,
Yeah.
kind of
Yes.
thing. Yeah, work your way up to what you want.
Slowly open them both. I mean, you want to open the tank first, and then slowly open the regulator.
Yeah, in this case, I think that no matter what I was doing, I wasn't getting a good seal, and just a little bit of a leak reduces the pressure in the system enough that it
Just
wasn't
enough
working right.
that-
So yeah, so I spent hours screwing around with that thing. I finally spent $16 on these 2 adapters, and it fixed
And
my
boom.
whole problem, and everything's good now. So just to pass that along to you, this is the first time I had ever worked with any plumbing for any gas or anything like that, and it took me a while to figure that out.
But
I didn't really do any beer work this week. I did a bit of pottering around out there. I did get myself anvil bucket number 4.
really,
Oh,
Number
nice.
Wow.
4.
I gotta tell you,
Yeah.
man, I'm a big fan. I'm
Yeah.
a big fan. I kegged
Anvil
my
bucket?
the Anvil stainless steel fermenting buckets.
Oh, okay.
7.5 gallon stainless.
Oh,
So
alright,
I kegged my first beer out of it, and that was great.
Yeah.
No auto siphon, anything like that. You open that valve, boom, it's
Boom.
in the keg. I mean,
Yeah.
it empties nice and quick. You can leave all your yeast and everything behind, and it cleans out so nice and easy. I mean, I'm a big fan.
Yeah.
I'm an instant convert to that.
Nice.
And I love being able to turn the dip tube wherever you want, so you can keep it out of the bottom of the bucket if you want to. So I've got my second batch going in it right now.
Nice.
And I'm throwing all kinds of blackberries and shit in there, and I'm not worried about cleaning it out at all. Worst case scenario, I could buy a couple of little stoppers, and I could fill this thing with boiling PBW and let it soak and clean anything I want out of it. So
Yeah, that's it. I just need to. I think I'm going to have a standby set of seals. Just to rotate through or something like that. But
probably not a bad idea.
So does this thing sit? How do you guys ferment? Do you ferment in a refrigerator?
I let the yeast do it.
Yeah, it's
So I do a mix of both.
There's
It depends
Nigel,
on what
everyone.
it is, especially lately with
Presenting
all these
Nigel.
like Kvike and Javaro yeast we've been working with and everything that can be room temperature. I have a pub in my house, and I just put them in there.
All right.
'Cause
So
the-
before that, did you?
I've also got a firm chamber, and so I would tape the probe to the outside if I was doing
Will
that.
this fit into a normal refrigerator?
it'll fit.
It will for
in,
me. Yeah.
Like the 5.3 that I have that fits a bucket or a carbo. It'll fit in that same. It's basically got the same footprint, almost the same footprint as a 7.9 gallon bucket. I would
Yeah,
say.
they're
when you add the handle in.
Cool.
they fit nice. And I can in some of the older upright fridges I've got, and I ferment in chambers, I can actually fit 2 of them in at a squeeze, but it is a squeeze. But yeah, one of them will fit nice and easy into a standard refrigerator.
I love the way that the lid goes on it. It's
With those
really easy
clamps.
to take on and off, and
Yeah.
the way the
Yeah.
clamps are spring loaded.
Yeah.
It's so easy. And when I first saw those, I think I saw them at HomebrewCon for the first time, and I
Yeah.
thought, I don't know, I'm not
Yeah.
thrilled about that. I am sold,
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, under homebrew work you did this week, I think I can say yes on 3 of the 4 questions here.
I was just trying to give people all right, things that. Oh yeah, I did that. Let me talk about it. So-
Well, and exactly. Did you brew anything interesting? I brewed my cinnamon toast crunch beer this week. So anytime you use
Yeah.
cereal in a mash, that's an interesting beer. But did you find a new product or try a new ingredient? Man, I got to tell you, I've been using that proper starter from Omega.
It's
that we've-
great.
It makes making a yeast starter so simple. I mean, last weekend I was brewing on Sunday, so Saturday night we were watching TV, and I was like, hey, the commercial break. I ran to the kitchen and made a starter, and I came back, and Sandra's like, you already done? And I'm like, yeah, like it takes
awesome.
nothing to make a
Yeah.
starter.
We'll talk more about that a bit later on as well. about
Cool. Yeah,
the
and that's-
prop starters. So.
And that's something I'm going to write. I wrote my blog about yeast and making a yeast starter, and I'm going to do like the dumbed down, demystified. Do this yeast starter. It takes 10 minutes.
We should probably touch on that in an episode too. Go back and
Yeah.
and,
Touch on the yeast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Touch on making
He likes to touch on
starters.
stuff.
Oh,
but
starters.
while we're talking about
Yeah.
that, didn't you do a beer? Didn't you brew a beer too for Thursday?
for the Omega. Well, and that was the new ingredient I used.
Oh, okay.
That was the gula. I used the new Omega.
Okay,
The-
yeah.
the-
Oh
the
man, I
Gulo.
can't wait.
Okay.
That,
Yeah, and I
which
guess
is-
we're gonna talk about
yeah.
that later, right?
Yeah,
So we don't go
yeah,
into it
we-
too much. Okay,
yeah.
I've got it back in my fridge.
Yeah.
I can't wait to use
Oh,
it.
nice.
Yeah. So anyway, we have, for you guys that don't know, if you're listening, it's this coming Thursday, right?
Yeah.
So it's
Yes,
this
this
coming
week.
Thursday. We have Omega Yeast Labs. They're going to come and do a presentation here at 7 p.m. If you're in the Metroplex or if you're coming into town for the
Bluebonnet.
for Bluebonnet, yeah, it'll be the night before the Friday night festivities. So if you have a chance to get in town early, come Thursday night, and I believe there will be some samples there to maybe taste from some of the local breweries around here that use the stuff. And we're going to have some, I think it's pulled pork taco bar. So you'll be able to get some food. If you want some food, though, however,
It's $10.
go and check it out and make sure to reserve your food because we want to make sure everybody has enough food for
I
all the
can't
people
believe
that are
I'm
coming.
missing this and Blue Bonnet.
It's by the way, it's on Facebook at 6:30. So
Is it 6:30?
That's
Okay,
what,
not
that's what
bad.
Facebook says. So
Okay, 6:30 is fine. Yeah. Well, we'll have
I
to
need
get here a little
beer.
earlier.
6:30?
Than
Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
I'm
Oh,
depressed.
hey,
I need
there you go.
beer.
So they're going to be talking primarily about the Kveik yeast, but they're going to talk about their other products, also their English and Belgian yeast, and also the proper starter as well. So
Have you used their English yeast much?
I've used their British Ale, which is the
I think that's the one I used.
The
Okay.
fuller strain,
Yeah, that's 1968.
1968 equivalent, and yeah, I love that. And I've used the British Ale one. Wasn't a huge fan of that, but it might have been the beer and not it might have been me as well, you know. So
Did you use the one that was the
you're going to say Boddington's, aren't you?
Boddington's? Yeah.
No, I didn't.
You don't like that beer,
no,
though, right?
No, that's right.
I'd be curious to see if it would, if it was just not in a nitro beer. Do you like bodies on cask or no?
You can't get it now.
Oh,
but
really?
Yeah, I don't. Well, at least I've not been able to see. I've not seen.
Let the bodies hit the cask.
Nice.
I've not seen Boddington's in cask
You want me
in
to keep
many
going?
years. It actually was
No.
pretty good,
Okay.
and they ruined it when they put it on nitro.
Well,
Ruined
see,
it.
and talking about that about the Omega yeast, I used the 004 last week. I built a 1 liter starter for it.
Which
and
one is that?
That's the West Coast. That's
Okay.
just the the basic West Coast. I used it. The yeast was less than a week old. I built a 1 liter starter. That damn thing clogged my blow off for 3 days.
Yeah.
For 3 straight days, my blow off was, continually. That was a beast.
See, and that's kind of where I'm at with the Omegas too. Is like before, like I want to use the Omega because it's a unique strain, and now I'm like,
It's just
I'll use the Omega over an equivalent strain because
Yes.
it's a bigger pitch. It seems to be really good,
Aggressive.
healthy yeast,
Yeah.
and I love it. I
So,
just love
you
it.
know-
I used Hornindale in my beer last weekend, and within 3 hours it was pushing the air lock.
Yeah.
yeah. It's
Yeah, the
that's-
Kvikes are quick.
That's
It-
pitching
yeah.
at that's pitching at 96 degrees.
Well,
Yeah.
one of the things I would say, what is absolutely amazing to me, we've gone through multiple different liquid yeast companies other than
Yeah.
the other two, and the one thing I would say about Omega for us from a sales standpoint, and this usually tells me something about the product, is that I think we're getting close to being on par with White Labs and Y yeast.
Mhm.
Really?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
tell you, the,
Oh,
f-
wait,
the
we-
freshness.
well,
that yeast I pitched was 2 days old.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. I got it when we got it in. I think it was March 1st that we got it in. The date, and they sent it 2-day shipping. The date on it was the 27th. So literally, it came off the production line. They stuck it in the box, shipped it 2 days to us. So you're getting yeast that's 2, 3, 4 days old, and we turn it so quickly that
I mean, you're getting a larger pitch too.
Yeah.
Very little of our Omega over there is less than a month and a half old. I mean, we just turn it so much, and it's so fresh when we get it.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah, I can't say enough great things about Omega yeast.
Well, and the thing about it is that, and I was just kind of like, Bill, whatever. But they really try to they try to make the so if it's a lager, they typically will have a lot more yeast than
Right.
the 1.5 billion. They actually have 3 or 4 times that amount.
I
So-
really feel like the ale strains have a larger amount too. Just totally unscientifically based on the.
You don't count?
I don't make starters with their yeast. Now I'm brewing real low gravity beers, 1048, 1050, that
Right.
kind of thing. But I've just been pitching them in out of the pack, which I know you hate. But they take right off, and I have no ill effects from it so far.
Well,
So-
if it's a proper pitch, I don't have a problem with you pitching it directly in, and especially if you're using some oxygenation in it too, So
Yeah.
Well, that was the other thing I did with that last beer that I built up that was like less than a week old. I oxygenated my wort for the first time, and man, I mean, like Nigel was saying, within a few hours, I had good fermentation signs, and then, like I said, it clogged my blow off for 3 days. It was just that yeast was insane.
So if you're in the area, make sure you come by for that. The guys from Omega, you've heard our interview with them, and we talked to them out at HomebrewCon, and we just really like them as well. They're great to talk to, really informative. So
And
be a
that's
good
one of the
event.
things too, guys out there. We talk about this probably not enough, is that Omega is not giving us anything for this whatsoever. That's the whole reason that we do this show, and we don't have sponsors, is because we really, when we're talking about a product that we really like, we really do like it. It's not just because they sponsor our show or something like that. And that's the whole thing that's so important about you guys that are patrons out there that help us with the production and the costs of everything to get everybody home safe, and beers and all of that stuff. And
and it's important to note that if they were paying us, I would absolutely say I liked it if I didn't. I'm a whore, and I would say it. So
I knew that. I knew it. Somehow I knew that.
yeah, well, what can I say?
but anyhow, anybody else have any brew work they did? I mean, I did beer work this week, but it
You
was a
did
little
sales work.
different
You do
type
beer
of
work
beer.
every
Yeah.
week.
I brewed a Hellas. I brewed a Saison for Thursday.
No, you did the spelt saison, right?
No,
That's the one we did in the shop.
That's a
Oh,
shop
that's the
one.
one y'all didn't.
Yeah.
I did a Saison recipe I'd used before, but I did the Mandarina Bavaria, and I got some of
I love those hops.
the wet hops.
Oh yeah.
I got a can of that. I did
I need to get some of those.
I did it in the mash just to get that aroma that'll
Okay.
carry over into the final product. And I figured it's all Mandarina Bavaria to go along with that Javaro yeast with that citrus undertone that it's going to give the beer.
That'll
So
be interesting.
that'll be fun. I'm looking
Will
forward
be.
to trying that one.
Will be. So what I did all week is toured the hill country. Lots of new breweries out there, man. I mean, it's starting to become like farmhouse brewery central down there. Really beautiful. I'm starting to think that this is the new norm, is destination breweries. Almost kind of like a winery in a fact.
Now, if the new norm would be that they also had food, I'd be a happy guy. you know?
Some of them do.
Good.
Like this one that I went to today, it's called Roughneck. And it is down there in Wimberley, which is just down, what would you say, northeast of San Antonio.
Yeah.
And man, absolutely beautiful
Northwest.
place, and it's got a really pretty. They're all like these great big farmhouse buildings with these big, the big timber frame stuff. Man, it's absolutely breathtaking. So, if you have a chance, get down to all those different breweries down there. A lot of the guys, man, they were super kind to me. Wimberley Brewing Company, they gave me a bunch of beer, and a lot of the other guys. They're really nice. So.
Is that some of that made its way into the studio?
Yes,
here?
it did.
it's-
We'll
it's
drink some of
they're
it
actually in the
here
fridge.
after the break. yeah.
All right.
So,
All right.
Once you've gone through. all
so
the
that was my
lagers.
beer work. I just
So
went
let's
to
get
breweries.
into our back to basics review here. I really liked what who picked this. Was it Nigel? Or?
Yeah.
Nigel picked this, and I found this information.
I like this one. This is one that is definitely worth going back and talking about as alpha acids and IBUs.
And the notes I found here are just some basics that we can expand on. But
Well, this is something that I think it gets lost on newer brewers and takes a while for people to understand, and it's to their detriment. I think this is a basic concept that you really need to be familiar with right from the very beginning. Is alpha acids, what they do, and how they play into determining what your beer is going to taste like. So I'll go ahead and read from this. Alpha acids are the principal components in lupulin, the resin of the hop cone. They're of great interest to brewers because they're the main bittering agent in hops. They're expressed as a percentage of the total weight of the hop and exist as complex hexagonal molecules. See, I always thought they were
Tetrahedrons?
yeah, tetrahedrons. I didn't know they were hexagons. So, alpha acid analogs include humulone, cohumulone, adhumulone, which when isomerized to isohumulones or isoalpha acids, and that's how you'll see it written in brewing books and in recipes and that kind of thing, is isoalpha acids. Through the boiling process, they bring bitterness to beer. So alpha acids don't mean anything in and of themselves. It's not until you boil them and isomerize them, which is just a fancy way of saying you're chemically changing them to make them soluble in water, is all it is. And then they become isoalpha acids, and that's when they contribute bitterness to beer. Hop varieties are often grouped into 4 categories based on their alpha acid content. There's low alpha with levels of 2.5 to 6%. These are dual-purpose varieties with alpha acid levels of 6 to 10%. Then there are high alpha bittering varieties with alpha acids of 10 to 15%. And then you're seeing a lot of these now coming out, the super alpha bittering, which are in the 14 to 18%. And hell, we've even got stuff going up into the 20s now. Yeah.
The 2017 crops of a lot of the Australian hops were, because I got some of the Ella, the Galaxy, and one other, and they all were 22, 23. I mean, they were super high.
One of the things I really like about those type of hops is that it's easy to use a small amount and hit your bitterness where you want it, and you're just cutting down on how much hop matter that you're throwing into there.
Yeah, we've talked sometimes about these lower alpha hops and how many ounces you have to put in and all that vegetal material that you can get all flavors from, and you use these higher alphas, and it's
or even just some flavor carry through that you may not want to have. You may want to just know that this part of my recipe, I'm just adding bitterness, and that's it. And the less hops you have to throw in there to do that, the better.
Right, because they're not isomerizing until later on. Yeah.
So, that's one of the things to really keep in mind as a newer brewer when you're looking at alpha acids. That really that's their significance to you as a brewer, is how much bitterness they're going to contribute.
Yeah, it's funny though. Today, people really don't adhere to that anymore. Oh, this is a bittering hop, this is a flavoring hop, this is a aroma hop. They're just like, just pounding shit. But I mean,
you're right. People are bittering with Citra and things like that, which was a big no-no back in the day.
Citra's big enough that you could bitter with very
It's
easily.
big enough, but it always had a reputation as being a harsh bittering hop, that it wasn't really good. I think Citra has changed over the years. I think that's the reason that you see it being used a lot more.
Amarillo's changed. Cascades changed.
Yeah.
I mean, all those
Citra has become less of a monster invade your entire beer and take it over hop. It's a little easier to use in with other things.
It's not as cat pissy.
It's not as cat pissy.
Definitely not.
So why do we
mosaic.
need bitterness in beer?
Yeah, so that's where it leads us into the other part, which is IBUs. So IBU stands for International Bitterness Units, the internationally agreed upon standard for measuring bitterness in beer. IBU values are an important quality control measure for defining beer flavor and determining whether a particular batch of beer is true to its style or brand specifications.
And really, that's a number to fit a vital statistic.
Yeah, it's a way to quantify the amount of bitterness that's in there. It's important to know as a home brewer that you're working off of calculated bitterness, not actual. Like when you look at a beer, a commercially packaged beer from a larger brewery, they're having it analyzed. They know what the IBUs are. We're using one of a few different possible formulas to calculate it. It's not necessarily accurate.
I would say that probably most even breweries don't do the actual. They do calculated.
The smaller craft breweries,
they don't have them analyzed.
And personally, I don't know why you would need to.
You wouldn't. It's extra expense. And it looks a lot cooler if you put 120 calculated IBUs versus maybe 80 that's actually in there.
Right.
We'll see. And on the flip side, I've wanted to do an experiment for months now. There was a brewery in Chicago that did a 0 IBU beer. That by the math, it had 0 IBUs. They sent it off and tested, and it came back 50. So they're on the flip side. They're advertising it as a 0 IBU beer, as opposed to going to the other extreme.
And I think that's a good point, because it all depends on. So you're isomerizing hops as long as your wort's over 160 degrees. So a lot of the times, if let's just say it takes a long time to cool your beer down, well,
Is it 160? I thought it was 180.
maybe it's 180.
I think it's 180.
Yeah, I think it's 180.
180.
Even still, you're still getting bitterness from those hops. So if you keep it really hot for a long period of time, I think it's you're adding IBUs to the beer that you may not have even
Exactly.
calculated for.
That's one of the nice things about the new Beersmith is
yes.
that you can add in your whirlpool time and it'll calculate the isomerization that's happening
Yep.
after
Yeah.
flame out. I really like that. One of the things to note that's important: beers can range from 1 to 100 IBUs, is what it's saying in here. They can range a
We're
lot
going
higher than
higher,
that, but it's in round numbers. You generally can't taste. You can't distinguish.
Well, that's why there's a
above
scale
100.
to 0 to 100. That's
Yeah.
what the human tongue can taste.
Yeah.
However,
now different people are different. It's not going to
Yeah,
be an absolute 100 thing.
there
But
it's proven that there is people that can taste 120 IBUs, but
Mhm.
it's not. But on average, most people can taste 100.
something
So-
something ex-wife.
She's bitter tongue.
Yeah, something. There's an ex-wife joke.
But that's one of the things I think is real interesting too. Is that for you guys that are beginners, one of the things that I think is always common misconception is that how well this is all has to do with balance too, and how big an alcohol beer. Of course, the higher the alcohol beer, the more hops you're going to have to use or alpha acids to be able to balance the beer with. So those are things to really consider too.
And that's what I thought the next bullet point was maybe the most important of all these was regardless of how IBU values are derived, they do not provide information about the quality of the bitterness. And it's why I hate to see IBUs on beer menus. I've said it several times in the show before because that information in and of itself is totally useless.
Well, that's one thing that, like, we've had this discussion before, and I'm going to brew 2 beers, single malt, single hop, but I'm going to hop them the same IBUs calculated, and I want to go about 40 IBUs, but I want to do very little bitterness in one, and the rest of it be all. It's all going to be aroma and flavor.
It's all the same.
But I want it to calculate out at about 40 IBUs, and then I want to do the exact same grain bill
With the
and
bitter.
do it almost all bittering. And then I want to send them off to Ward Labs and have them IBU test them, and then we're going to try them on the show.
Well, here's one of the things that I think is real interesting too, and I think Brandon, I think you're perfect and dead on when you say I hate when I see IBUs on a beer list, and the reason being is because I've seen this 100 times, especially when I'm at a brewery or something, and these people have already been trained to go, okay, more IBUs, the more bitter it's going to taste to me.
Right.
And so a lot of times what I'll see is we'll see I'll have a lady standing next to me. It was not too long ago. I think it was over at Cowtown, or was it Cowtown? I don't know. Anyways, she goes, "Oh, I don't want that stout because it has 50 IBUs."
Right. Exactly.
And really, a 40, 50, 60 IBU IPA is probably pretty normal, right?
Right.
But in a stout, 40 IBUs is not that high. I mean,
Right, but and then in a blonde, 40 IBUs would be way too bitter. It's
blow your head off.
totally different. Yeah, and I think also the average beer consumer, craft beer fan that doesn't really know technically about things, they'll interpret that as how hoppy is that beer, and we've talked about that before too. That hoppy is a weird term in and of itself because are you talking about bitterness? Are you talking about flavor or aroma or whatever? And that really has nothing to do at all with how much hop flavor it might have in it. So,
and in the new Beersmith, there's it might be in Beersmith 2, but I know it's in Beersmith 3. There's a ratio that shows you the bitterness to to gravity ratio.
bitterness to ABV, I think is what it is.
I think that's it. And to me, that's a better representation of how bitter your beer is going to be.
And that's a really good point because that is a reason to get used to paying attention to the IBUs and what their relationship is to the rest of the beer. When you're in Beersmith or really any software where you're designing a recipe and maybe you want to take a blonde and make it 8%. When you move that ABV scale up, the IBU scale is going to have to also increase on
Yes.
there. Or the opposite is true. If you're making a session IPA is going to need probably 25 IBUs.
It's
you know,
going to
rather
need a
than
lot
50,
different bittering.
you know?
Exactly.
So you have to understand that relationship between the gravity and not just the starting gravity, but the finishing gravity too.
Well,
So-
yeah, that's the other side of it.
So the other thing that I think we should hit on this is a lot of times, I think you asked a question earlier, Nigel, is why do we put
Right,
hops in
yeah.
beer at all?
Yeah.
Well, the reason being is because if you made a beer and didn't use any hops or any kind of bittering substances, well, it just tastes like it would just taste like
A spitting camel.
it would just taste just like like syrup. It would just
Yeah,
taste so sweet you wouldn't
overly
want to
sweet.
drink it.
Right.
So, and actually, in regardless, man, you totally threw me off with that, dude.
He was drawing charts over there, so I drew a chart of my own.
But
It's on a sliding scale.
the whole reason that in relative terms, hops are relatively new to beer.
or a bell
I
curve.
mean, it's for years what they used were traditional brewing spices and
Cow pies.
and the spices were used to
Flowers.
to bitter. But so I mean, like traditional brewing spices would be something like sage or what's
Badger's nipples.
Lemongrass.
You're totally trying to screw me up tonight.
No,
man.
but juniper was a big one.
berries,
Yeah.
juniper berries.
Otters' noses.
Yeah. Otters'
There you go.
noses.
Nigel got it. All right.
Anyway, I'll digress. Okay,
Yeah.
so anyway, IBUs.
It was the Monty Python reference for all of you who didn't catch it.
Yeah.
Sorry.
There we go. Another C and D
All right.
letter.
All right.
We could say Monty Python.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They'll be,
Python.
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 Monty Python.
Monty Python.
Yeah.
All right.
They'll be happy we did.
Yeah.
Keeps them relevant.
Right.
Just one more wafer.
So now
All
on
right.
to,
Wafer thin mint.
Unsolicited answers.
unsolicited
Very-
answers.
Unsolicited answers to internet
It's a
questions.
very underrated movie.
It is. That's
Meaning a
actually
lot.
my favorite.
Yeah.
My
it's
favorite
an
one. Yeah.
excellent movie.
So this one is kind of a back to basics one too, and it's another basic concept we've talked about over and over again, but can't be repeated enough based on what I read on the internet. This is maybe one of the most difficult things for newer brewers to grasp. So I started brewing a caribou slobber extract kit from my homebrew store 2 days ago, and the brewing seemed to go fine. I followed the instructions to the letter. The next day when it started to ferment, I needed to replace the airlock with a blow-off tube because the krausen had bubbled out of the airlock. The blow-off tube seemed to be working fine, and there was what seemed like a lot of bubbles going through it. But today, after it calmed down substantially and I replaced the airlock, it seemed to have stopped bubbling.
Oh no.
Is this a problem, or am I worrying about nothing? It's my first experience with homebrewing, so I'm hoping I didn't somehow kill it 2 days into what seems like a really fun hobby.
Wow. Okay, so he's a new brewer and he already knew the word Krausen.
and blow off.
Yeah,
And
actually,
blow-off.
that's pretty good. He
Yeah,
knew to do
yeah.
the blow-off tube and everything.
Yeah.
That's a good point. I didn't catch that, but yeah, he
Yeah.
really was doing a pretty good job up until he started to worry too much about
Maybe
everything.
Well, yeah,
he's
I mean,
been a co-brewer or he's done lots of research and studying. And
Initially, I'm like, "Hey, well done, dude!" Like,
Yeah,
you-
exactly,
You
yeah.
replaced it with a blow off. That we never hear of that, like on your first brew, like that.
He must have read the book beforehand.
Yeah, he definitely watched a bunch of good YouTube videos or something.
Yeah.
So the bubbling in the airlock thing is a real pet peeve for me especially because a lot of, and I don't know if this is as common these days, but years ago it was, wait until there's one bubble every 2 minutes and then you move it to secondary, which is a
Right.
stupid way to determine when to move a beer to secondary. A beer can bubble or not bubble for a lot of different reasons. It's an indicator that fermentation is happening, but it's not in any way definitive
an
at all.
indicator.
It's just an indicator. Don't rely on it for anything. I've had beers where no bubbles came out at all, and then I checked it and it's fully fermented and done, and there could be a leak somewhere. It just takes the tiniest of little leaks for no bubbles at all to come out of the airlock. And then also, once it's done with active fermentation, it's not done. The
Exactly.
yeast have created a lot of things that they've got to go back and clean up, and you need to let them sit there and do their thing. And so don't get hung up on bubbles in your airlock or in your blow-off tube is the long and the short of that.
and it doesn't necessarily wind down. It can just stop.
Yeah, it can.
I mean,
yeah.
I've had an airlock running like a train, and 30 minutes later there was nothing. I mean, it just ended.
Yeah, like Brandon said,
Typically, it's just clogged when it goes from that.
Oh no, this one wasn't.
sometimes it was one of the old Mangrove Jack yeast that we're not getting, and I don't know if they changed the names. It was one of the British strains.
Oh.
It was one of the British strains. that-
MO7 or something.
I don't remember, but it was one that you could watch and watch and watch, and you go to bed and you wake up the next morning and the
And it's
entire
done.
fermentation is done, and you're looking at it and you have to open the bucket to see the Croydon ring, and you go, oh, okay, it's completely done.
Finished.
That might have been the MO7.
I think that probably was.
I
Yeah.
think I loved that yeast.
Too
So
bad they
I
got
mean,
rid of it.
how do you know when your fermentation's done? Take a gravity reading,
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then let it sit some more.
Yeah.
and then let it sit and take another gravity reading.
Now,
and
now
compare
having
'em.
said that, I will say that as much as I've brewed over I still get a kick out of seeing bubbles in the airlock. I
Oh
mean,
yeah,
At this point, you've done all your work and you're
just
letting the
gives you a
yeast
little
go do
tickle?
its work. Yeah, just a little tickle.
Oh yeah, I mean,
But now you're just standing there doing nothing, so it feels like some affirmation that you've done everything right when you see the bubbles.
Oh,
Yeah.
totally. I mean, when my airlock clogged the first time, or the blow off tube clogged the first time, I was like, hell yeah, I did my job.
Right.
But then by day 2, when it still clogged, and by day 3, I was like, all right, enough. I got my affirmation. The yeast was kicking and doing its thing, but now you're just becoming a pain in the ass. It's becoming more work.
So
So
when it blows the lid off.
Yeah,
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
I mean, there's a certain satisfaction from using a glass or a see-through carboy rather than a
Oh, yeah.
bucket.
That's
Absolutely.
the only
You know,
drawback
but
to
with
those
the anvils. That's
Yeah,
exactly
yeah.
what I was going to say. Yeah.
Because I had been using the Fur Monsters a lot, and I still really
Yeah.
like the Fur Monsters.
Yeah.
And the main reason I like them is you can really see
See
what's
what's
going
happening.
on in there. Yeah, yeah.
so you just need to combine the lid of a grainfather to fit onto the
Well, all of the
anvil.
other benefits that
anvil.
the anvils have make up for that.
Yep. I'm
Definitely.
There.
So
All right. So
okay, so I did have one of our listeners send me a message on Facebook recently, asked me some questions about kegging. I just wanted to touch on that real quick. It was John Weller was asking about it. He had done his first kegging, and he had mentioned that there was a little bit of confusion when we're talking about carbing pressure and serving pressure, because he had a question, and I said, well, your serving pressure and your carbing pressure are the same. You leave your pressure at the right pressure and temperature to keep your beer carbonated to the level you want it, and that's what you serve at. And from there, you adjust your system, your lines, basically, to accommodate that so that it doesn't foam too much. And he said, well, I've heard you talk about carbing pressure and serving pressure, so I thought they were different. And I thought that was something worth touching on, because when I say carbing pressure, I carbonate my beer at like 35 or 45 pounds, somewhere between 35 and 45, because I want to do it in a couple of days.
Yeah.
And then I drop it down to whatever pressure it needs to be at to hold the carbonation and serve it. So that's why the difference between when we say carbing and serving pressure. But some people think that, you carb at like 12 or 15 psi and then you drop it down to 4 or 5 to serve it to keep it from foaming when you have like a 3-foot serving line or something like that.
Right.
And
well, I would say too, when you do those higher pressure carbonation, when you turn it down, I mean, I always turn off my gas and release the head pressure.
oh yeah, definitely.
Because all it does is kind of replaces what your head pressure is, and it'll shoot out of there like 1,000,000 miles an hour.
Oh yeah.
So you gotta release that head pressure.
Done that before. Yeah.
Wait, I turned it down to 10 psi. What the hell? Yeah. So anyway,
So that was worth touching on. You need to be keeping your beer at the proper pressure for carbonation. And there's charts out there that tell you at this temperature and at this pressure you'll get this much carbonation in it. And you need to follow those. And then have long enough serving lines to keep it from foaming. Don't turn down the pressure to keep it from foaming.
did you bring your Goza?
I did.
I'll go get Chris's beers.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we got a couple beers that or a couple little experiments that we did.
I'd like to do the Goza first, just because I'd like everybody with fresh palates. We've had some palate cleansing beer here.
Yeah, for sure.
And on a side note,
Yeah.
I like Pabst and I like Lone Star. Together, when you blend them, they're really good. Actually,
what do you think of this one?
this is awesome. I love it. It's not as clean. Is this the second version?
No.
Okay.
This is the Summer Pills clone.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And this is the fast lagered.
I was gonna say it
Nice.
tastes more like an ale fermentation. I do get a little bit of that soft roundness, maybe a little sweetness
It's-
from it, but really nice though.
really nice,
Yeah, it drinks
yeah.
great.
So I still have the lager going.
what's
Traditional.
up, Brock?
All right, good
Did you bring some banquet?
Brought some banquet.
Yeah, tall boy.
Natty Light and Natty Daddy. Oh, it's gonna be one of those shows.
Brilliant.
Some Yingling, nice.
More Yingling.
You already had some Yingling.
Wait, is that an ice?
I didn't.
Get this on camera.
All right, Nigel.
Uh,
Natty Daddy.
Oh, that's a thing? I
Yeah,
thought that was a nickname you were saying.
Oh, it's
An 8% Natty Light. I got it.
Someone has to shotgun that Natty Daddy.
I'll give someone a $50 to butt chug it.
I'll kick in the other $50.
That may be the only one that may be worth actually shotgunning. I can't do those shotgun a damn IPA,
I have no-
man. I cannot do it. I cannot.
I have
do
no
it.
problem getting beer into my body fast enough, so I don't do things like
I don't
shotgunning
do
or
it,
beer
no.
bongs or anything like that. I mean, I get it in there at the sufficient rate. So,
All right.
all right, so let's get some cups passed out here.
Yeah.
So what we're gonna do now is, we a few episodes ago we did the Gozas from Leipzig, which we found were completely different than American versions of Goza, and I immediately wanted to brew it because I thought it was really fantastic, really refreshing, nice bright citrusy beer. And I liked it not sour, just a little bit tart, and so I brewed it, and I've got my version here. And I'm not going to talk about it at all. I just want everybody to drink it, compare
All
it,
right.
and
So
talk about it.
we've got just one bottle of this that I brought back from Germany.
Yeah, so just a little pour, just to
So-
kind of remind you.
I didn't get to
Yeah.
try this
Any-
before, so
Anybody got a?
yeah, I got one.
You got an opener?
Got cups.
So
Oh, that's why 2 cups.
yeah. So I think
cups
this is
from
a
Brew?
really.
No,
Let's
no.
refresh everybody on what we talked about. So
Right.
when you're drinking Gozas here in America, what you're getting is a pretty sour beer with a pretty firm salt flavor to it. It's light bodied. They're usually pretty clear. There's a lot of them have fruit, that kind of thing in it. What we found when we were drinking this was that it was much closer to a Weizen in terms of it was very cloudy. It had a nice mouthfeel to it. The coriander really stood out nice and blended in well, but you could taste it was there. It had very, very little sourness to it. I really would just call it a little bit of citrus tartness. And we really found it was more like a wheat beer. So, again, I don't want to talk about mine until everybody's had a chance to drink it and comment on it. But we're going to pour this
Anybody
German Goza.
Who doesn't have any?
Yeah, these two over here.
Some of the
don't.
back.
Let's make sure we get some poured for them.
yeah.
I know this always makes for great listening. Pour
Yeah,
water.
yeah.
Freaking
Yeah.
like lemon.
I think we're doing better than normal here.
lemon pith.
Everybody,
Everybody got one?
did
didn't
you
get any?
some, Mike? Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, make sure you get some.
All right, hold on one second. I'll pour this way.
I got a little bit extra in this glass.
What
I
is the
could
name of
pour
this
some.
beer?
German goodness.
Goza.
All right.
Goes up.
Yeah, it's German.
Yeah, so this is the from the brewery and Leipzig that I
Original
brought back.
Leipzig beer.
But
It's called Goza.
it may be getting a little long in the tooth too, because this has been a while since I've had this.
But still pretty bright.
Yeah.
Goes it down well.
Very, it's so nice. It's just enough. You know,
Okay.
it's just enough to like maybe give you a little bit of tartness in the back of your
That
cheek.
description in Brewing with Wheat that says it should taste kind of like
It should be
a cracker, and have just enough to kind of cleanse the palate. Those are things I get, but the sourness that I talk about,
right.
not even
Right.
not even
No,
near.
it's just
not oversalted
no.
at all either.
No,
it's
it's
No,
just-
you're right.
like a
Okay, so I
teardrop.
brought plenty of this, so everybody
It's
take a
just
healthy
enough
pour.
salt that it just cleanses your palate
like
as
like
it.
a teardrop almost.
Yeah.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I would say almost that if you didn't know there was salt put in there, you probably wouldn't
wouldn't.
know.
Wouldn't look for it.
And the
you
coriander
didn't know,
too.
you wouldn't know.
Coriander's really restrained.
Oh, really? I get the
I get the
coriander
coriander
nice
in
and
the
bright.
nose.
I get it,
definitely.
but it's not. It's not
Oh, Mike, you give me a cup.
people making a wit
Oh, wait,
beer.
here. I got one.
You know.
I think you did a pretty good job.
So this is my first
Oh,
attempt.
hey.
I have some ideas on what I would do different. You need a cup? But I just kind of want to get everybody's thoughts before I get into what I did and why I did it. Here, there's plenty in here.
It definitely has a different aroma.
Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely does.
I'm not sure that's a bad thing though. I like this. It smells like wheat to me.
A little sweeter.
Yeah, a little less citrus. I'm glad everybody enjoys this drink.
Yeah, it's very.
Yeah. Sorry,
It's
guys.
good enough that nobody's talking, so that's a good sign, right? When they say it's quiet at the dinner table.
Nobody's saying, what the hell?
No, I mean, here's the thing. I think this is a hell of a great first attempt. I think
That's kind of where I landed on it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think. I mean, it's very drinkable. It's easy to drink.
Talk about your recipe a bit.
Yeah,
Brandon.
talking about.
Okay, so when we drank it, my original thought when we first drank this beer was, this is just 50% wheat, 50% Pilsner. When Mikey and I talked about it at the shop and he was showing me some recipes, those had a little bit of Munich in them. And now that I did this, I would put some Munich in it. I think that's the change I would make to it to give it a little bit of that bready flavor to it.
Cracker, as Mike was talking about.
The other thing is that I was trying to, you got 3 different things in there. You've got coriander, you got salt, and you've got some sort of acid in there. And I was trying to creep up on those without going too overboard on any of them. I think that I could do more with the coriander. I think the salt is about right. Now, what I did with the acid was instead of trying to do like a Berliner Weiss type of brew or anything like that, I just put citric acid and lactic acid in this. Okay. And I think that that's sufficient. I could maybe go a little bit more.
I think
than
a little
this,
bit more.
Yeah.
but I don't think I need to do a different method.
Now you put that in post fermentation?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Let me
Just
ask
added
you
it to the
this:
keg.
salt-wise, did you just use table salt or did you use sea
I
salt?
used pink Himalayan salt.
Okay.
Which is the only
fancy.
reason I do that is because I use it on another beer that I brew and I know how much to use for a 5-gallon batch. It's a little bit more of a mild salt, so it's easier to work in.
See, for me, I get the salt on the end. I'll maybe back off on it a little bit.
Oh, you think you'd back off on it some? Okay.
Just a hint, maybe just,
Really?
just a
Brighten up
hint.
a little bit.
I don't
in the
know.
lemon and
I
the
mean,
coriander.
I get it on the finish, like in the back of my
Well, I
throat.
definitely wanted to make sure that there was a little bit of it there. The coriander was what I was worried about going. Now, the coriander is the one part where I screwed up on my brew day too, because Chris and I were talking, and
Drinking.
then it's almost time to put the coriander in, and I had whole coriander. I didn't have ground, and I thought, oh shit, and I'm trying to smash it up with a spoon, and then it was time to put it in, so I dumped it in, and then I realized I could have just run this through my goddamn grain mill, and in half a second. So I think if I would have used the same amount of coriander, but I would have milled it, that I would have got a little bit brighter coriander flavor to it. But coriander is one of those things that once you go a little bit too much, it
way
takes
too
over the
much.
whole beer. Yeah. So I think what I did on this was I hit the spirit of it. I got closer to a Goza than you're going to get with commercial Gozas that you find.
Oh yeah, for
But
sure.
I can definitely think of a couple things I would do to tweak it next time, particularly the Munich. I think the Munich would make a big difference in it.
Yeah.
The Munich and I think you could go a touch more sour, a touch more of the acid,
Little bit, yeah.
a little bit more tart, and I think that would play off the salt a little bit different too. So
Yeah, I
probably.
agree with you on that. Yeah.
I think maybe the tartness would balance the little bit of the salt, a little too much salt that you get on the back end.
Yeah.
So that might,
What I do like about it is that it's really light and drinkable and refreshing.
definitely.
And like I'm gonna blow through this keg, and I'm definitely gonna brew this again. When I first kegged it and tasted it, I thought, oh man, this is one that you just really like to have on tap.
So
yeah,
this,
especially coming up in the summertime.
Right.
so this may be a question you can't answer, and it may be a question you don't want to answer, and that's okay too. And I know that you didn't brew it for this purpose. If this was being judged,
It would get hammered.
It would hammer
because it's not what people think it goes.
if
right,
I
right?
if I brewed one that tasted exactly like that German Goza we just drank, it wouldn't do well.
right.
And it's and that's not even to disparage the judges in any way, other than just you can't get anything here that tastes like a real Goza.
And you can't get to that by reading the words.
Right, because partially because the words have been written wrong.
The words are. Now that I've tried that, I can look back at the description and say it's absolutely 100% inaccurate.
Yeah, and
it's
when
a
I came in
well-known
the shop
book.
to buy the ingredients for this,
It's supposed to
Mikey
be
and
more
I were
sour
talk-
than a Berliner Weiss.
and
is that what
more
it says?
it says at least
least.
as sour as a Berliner Weiss. So yeah, as sour or more. No. And yeah, that's totally inaccurate. And I think that's the biggest flaw of Gozas that are brewed here is that they're way too sour. What I really like about that German one is that both the sourness and the salt are just a light accent to it that just make it more refreshing and more drinkable. Everything about the way that's brewed
That
is
was
to
more
make it refreshing and drinkable.
like a citrus blonde ale to
Yeah,
me.
yeah.
You know,
Uh-huh.
it's got some weed in it, but doesn't taste
yeah.
weedy. It's
Yes.
It's a citrusy blonde ale.
I don't know
Go past the weed.
if you other guys are getting this, but that's the thing I get is not actually the saltiness in the beer. I get it the lingering
Yes.
in my,
Right.
in my
Yeah,
mouth.
you
See,
get it.
Yeah,
I have to be careful too because my water has a lot of sodium in it to begin with. So
Okay.
I have to be careful about the salt, and that's probably part of it. Is I'm
Maybe.
putting
And
salt on top of salt.
I actually did find when Brandon and I were emailing and texting back and forth about
oh, that's
um,
right. Yeah.
stuff, I actually found the Leipzig water profile.
And so I did adjust this water to be Leipzig water, close to Leipzig water.
I'm wondering, brew it, and then try no salt edition. See what it's like
Yeah, that might be
without
something.
that. Because
I
that was
tried
the-
it because I put the salt in post
You didn't? Okay.
fermentation. I brewed this. The only thing I put in the brewing process was
the
the
coriander.
coriander. Yeah, because
Yeah.
I really feel like you need to put that in the boil.
Right.
And I put the salt in and the acids in post fermentation. I would up the citric acid. I think I would leave the lactic acid where it's at. I
Right.
think I would up the citric acid a little bit, and I think that might prop up the coriander.
So this
a
is
little bit.
totally a clean beer, though. I mean, it's
I am doing that all night. I hear your voice like, where is that coming from? Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
no-
it
no-
is absolutely a clean beer.
No lacto, no nothing. Yeah.
nothing.
Eric.
Because it's one of those, I've always been afraid to do something like that, but more and more in the shop, I have people, it's that time of year. I have a lot of guys looking to do a Berliner, looking to do a Goza, looking to do a sour like that, and it kind of has me maybe wanting to do one myself. So that's why I was asking. So it's a totally clean.
It is, and that's one of the things when we drank it, I thought, well, the amount of sourness, which is really just a little tartness, is all it is.
Right.
Yeah.
This could be done just by putting some acid in there.
Well,
You know?
and so they still try to kind of, even though Leipzig's not really in the whole original Reinheitsgebot, they all try to kind of stick to it now. And so what they do, they don't even do a lacto fermentation of the Goza.
Right.
What they do is they'll throw in a couple of sacks of, and they have a lactic fermentation, and then they boil it, and then they just take the lactic acid and add it back
Right.
to the
So
beer.
they're just doing the same thing, just by a more natural process than I'm doing it.
They're producing their own lactic acid.
I have the
basically.
freedom of being a home brewer and deciding.
I'm just going to stick some lactic acid in it. Yeah.
So
And I think that's the thing is I think a lot of the guys that are doing it here, they're actually doing a lactic fermentation.
yeah,
or a
I
kettle-
agree. I think
or
you're
a
right.
kettle sour.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think the problem with that is I think it just becomes like a sour golden ale at
Do we
that
want to
point,
Right.
rather than it kind of like misses the mark on the overall style. To me,
Yeah.
Yes, it does.
because I think this is what a Goza should taste like,
When-
or at
when-
least that's the way I want them to taste.
you know, when you
Now
brought it
I-
and we first tasted it, I thought, oh my God, this is fantastic. I have to have this.
Yeah.
And that's why I was so hot to trot to brew one, because I thought this is like nothing else I've ever had. And
There's
it's so refreshing and wonderful.
And I've already figured out, I think, how I'm going to do the grain. I just need to get the rest of your recipe, and I'm brewing this very soon.
Yeah.
You know what's funny is I
super simple.
guarantee you there's not a Goza in the United States that I'd sit at one setting and drink 1.5 liters of it.
Right.
But I had no problem doing that
Right.
when I was in Leipzig.
And see, in that regard,
And I wanted
think
to
I
drink more.
succeeded on this one. In that regard, I think I got the spirit of the beer in this one.
Oh, absolutely.
It's and I'm never going to match that beer exactly, and I don't know that you need to. I
Just
think
need
it
to be
just
close.
needs to be the
you need to be in the-
same
you need to be in
spirit.
the ballpark.
Yeah. And then for the yeast, I took Stubby's recommendation. I used the 107, the German ale yeast, because he says you can't get that thing to flocculate at all, and he's absolutely right. It's just like a Weizen yeast, and it's perfect. Yeah, I loved it. It fermented really nicely. It was really actually a quick, aggressive fermentation. I like that yeast a lot, actually.
Yeah.
So this will become one of my house beers. I'll definitely be brewing this again.
Yeah, we'll
So
talk
I was
on the
really
break.
excited to
yeah,
have
yeah.
this one for you
Yeah.
guys.
All right, so keep them separate, right?
Gotta keep them pushed together. I mean, separated.
Yes.
I'm really pissed.
Eric.
Yes.
I'll tell you why later.
Is this a different one, Nigel?
Yes.
Different from this one?
Yes.
Yeah, you got to
Yes,
keep these
the-
separated. So what we're pouring
Gotta
right
keep 'em
now, and what we're going to
separated.
talk about, and this has been a constant topic of conversation, not only in the homebrewing world on this show, and also on a particular experimental blog And this is about
And Reddit also.
old grains versus new grains. And when we're talking old grains, we're talking milled grains, grains that have been milled and then sit there for a while. And is there a difference to them, or is there not? So what Chris did here, well, you know what? I don't think I want to talk about what I want everybody to taste it and see what they think before they know what's going on.
Do we know the length?
I know all the
Okay,
details.
okay,
Yeah.
okay. Just making sure.
I told
So-
you earlier about average.
So let's drink
about the
number
girth?
1, number 2.
What about the girth?
Well, again, it's hockey.
I mean,
pucks.
if we're just looking at the two beers, there's obviously a
There's a
distinctive
color
color difference.
Very
in
big
the two.
difference in color. Yeah. This is the Mockingbird ESB kit from the store, which is a great kit. I love this beer.
Okay.
I know.
And maybe even the clarity. There's a little bit of a difference in the clarity too.
Yeah, a little bit. That might be down to color as well. But
Well, and that's something
Fair
too.
enough,
You got to
yeah.
think about that might be slight variances, and even his brewing process too. So I mean, I don't know if you can necessarily attribute that to.
okay, so for experimental purposes only, the first one I poured you, the lighter colored beer is A, and
Okay.
the other one is B.
Okay.
All right, so I got to text Chris and find out which is which.
Okay. Well, I would say this that the main differences I taste are not necessarily the malt.
I think
Yeah, B tastes hoppier.
Yeah, one of them's hoppier than
Keep
the
in
others.
mind that
Okay.
it, all of the ingredients. So basically, what he did,
Oh, he did everything.
He bought a kit of milled grains and hops and not the yeast, but everything else, and set it aside for 6 months.
Okay, so
Okay.
even the yeast or the hops are different.
The hops are set
Oh.
aside for 6 months.
yeah,
also.
I believe
So
I believe
everything
it's
in the
I
freezer
believe
or
it was one
just
of our
sitting there?
I believe it was one of our food bar kits. It was
Just basically, it was milled.
it was
and
milled.
supposed to
It
be-
was
didn't-
it was
yeah.
not in the freezer. It was just
Yeah.
sitting there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now it was a vacuum packed grain
Right.
bag, if I remember
Yeah.
correctly. And
Yes.
then he bought the same kit, and then he brewed them both on the same day, fermented them in the same place, and all that. I've
But-
got to text into him to find which is which.
But well, I got to ask though, is the one did he pull the? You need to ask him about the hops. Is the hops
Were the
they-
hops aged as well?
Yeah.
they
the
were
hops
they
are old
were
too.
they were refrigerated,
Okay,
But
but
they
for 6
sat-
months.
but they-
but for 6 months, yes.
Okay.
He bought the kit and put it away for 6 months.
Okay. Okay.
Well, that's what text him and see, because if he put the hops in the refrigerator for 6 months,
He did.
that's far different than if he had left the hops sitting
on a
on,
shelf.
on a shelf exactly
Yeah.
for 6 months.
But I
Or
mean,
in a freezer even,
as
right?
far as far.
Well-
I mean,
well-
to me though, I can't taste any difference in the malt.
Oh well,
there.
I haven't got to taste them yet, but on the
I think
aroma,
nose character
the
is definitely different. Yeah.
I want to get this right. The darker beer has got more hop aroma,
Correct. That's what I get.
It just smells.
Correct. Sorry.
but I
That's
also
what I get.
but I also think I get a bit more breadiness out of B as well, out of the darker one, which is B.
Now,
I agree with you on that. Yeah.
B for Brady.
I do get a little more breadiness out of it. Both of these have a pretty prominent English yeast ester character to them,
Yeah.
which is kind of, in my mind, kind of covering up some of the malt flavor.
Right.
USO4.
The hopping is pretty aggressive. They're both pretty bitter. I would say the bitterness is a little high on these. Personally, it's sitting on my tongue. Now I do know that when he brewed these, one of my experiences with old milled grains is that my efficiency plummets. Now, when I've done it, it was back in the days when we were just packing up recipes in a bag and putting a zip tie on them, and then they sat there forever, and I took them home. This was vacuum sealed the whole time.
Right.
And he did say that his efficiency was the same for both of them. He did not see a drop in efficiency on it.
That's another like I'd like to expand this experiment to a control batch of fresh and then sealed and bagged whole and then sealed and bagged
Milled.
milled and then some in the freezer and some sitting by the garage door.
Well,
So you're talking about like 17 different experiments on.
Oh no, I mean it's like
No, he did leave the grain sitting at room temperature. So personally, I think the big difference is going to be the oxidation. And
Yeah.
when these are vacuum sealed, I think that solves that problem to a large degree, as evidenced by the fact that his efficiency was the same. Now, which do you think is which? Because I have the answer.
I think B is the fresher.
I think B is fresh.
B. But in A, I'm picking up on some off flavor too, so that could have been something else done along the process.
I'm going with A to be contrary.
I would say B is fresher just simply because of the hop aroma.
Well, you
And-
get
and-
more of a
and the
hop.
more and the malt aroma as well. The aroma's fresher, you know.
Okay, A is the fresh one.
Really?
A is the fresh one.
Oh, I won.
A,
That was going to be my guess too, just based on color.
How old
Oh,
is
yeah.
it?
Right.
No,
So-
Well,
you can't do that now.
that was the only thing that threw me. I thought A would have been the fresher one because of the color, but the aroma.
But everything
Honestly,
else,
blindfolded,
I
I don't think I could pick these out in a triangle
No,
test.
probably not.
Really,
No.
to me, A has a flaw.
Yeah, there's a flaw.
Yeah.
in
That's
A,
what Brock is saying
definitely.
too.
Almost
in the
almost a
nose and
slight,
in the taste.
like a slight phenol almost.
See, I
Mhm.
don't get that at all.
Yeah. So I mean, you
I
know
can see
how I
that.
am. I'm a slightly.
Right away.
Yeah.
I
Kinda-
think
I'm
it
kinda-
stands out.
Peppery, or I get a little bit peppery.
Plastic.
Yeah, yeah, a little
You get
plastic.
plastic?
Yeah. Just,
Yeah,
I mean,
see, I
just,
don't get that at all.
I mean, dude, it's just a hint. It's there,
Right.
though.
Yeah. But A is the fresh.
A is the fresher
Interesting.
one, and while I do think if I sit here and taste these back and forth side by side, I do think that they taste a little bit different.
Right.
I think if you had blindfolded me for a triangle test, no way I would have been able
So
to pick them out.
so you okay? So
But
but
we're
age has affected the color, is what you're saying.
But that's going to
Yeah.
confirm the other blog.
Okay, so no, if
it
you
doesn't
taste
matter.
A now, taste A now.
Well,
and
here's the
you're gonna
difference.
get a weird spicy bitterness. Taste that.
Yeah.
Is there more of it? Give me some more of A.
Yeah, because I think
I
and
did
think-
notice that too.
I think that's coming
So-
from
because here's
that's
the
coming
thing,
from
and
a
here's the
phenol.
difference between.
Well, that's-
I want to address
well,
what
that's
Mikey
why I
just
asked about
said.
the peppery, because it's
And
that
and
little
that's-
spice. Yeah.
And that's part of the joke.
Well, yeah,
Right.
but
Peppery
it's the
thing.
important distinction to make too is that here we have one beer brewed by one person on their system in a certain set of circumstances, and you can't draw any conclusions
yeah,
from
no,
this.
no.
It's
Correct.
It's a dot in the space time
The
continuum. It's
one
not- it's
the
not a-
one conclusion I would draw based on what his experience versus my experience is that if your grains are vacuum sealed, it's going to keep them from degrading to the point your efficiency is going to drop way off.
Right.
Because I'm
Yeah.
pretty consistent on my efficiency. I don't get fantastic efficiency. I do 75 is about what I get.
36.
But I always get 75.
Right.
I'm very consistent on my efficiency. And when I would bring home those old bags before our old way of doing
Right.
it and they sat there on the shelf, it would be 60, 65. I mean, a noticeable
Yeah, I
drop.
think we're
Right.
just
That
talking
doesn't
about a
happen
matter
by
of
accident.
oxidation,
That's
though.
something there. So yeah, I think
Totally.
the fact that it's oxidized and the fact that this is vacuum packed grains makes a big difference. And there, that
well, that's
really
one of the
bodes,
reasons we do it.
Exactly.
Yes,
that
it
really
is.
bodes
Yeah.
well for buying kits this way and knowing that okay, if I don't get to this right away, I'm going to be okay.
So
Right.
so expand on that, Stubby. Let folk know when they buy equipment kits.
Well, what we try to do is,
ingredient
yeah,
from
when we try to, and here's the rub is we try to vacuum pack them the best way we can, and the biggest sometimes, however, though when they do arrive, they have lost their seal. Because it's
Yeah.
it's
Temperature
rough.
change.
Yeah,
And it's
yeah.
a grain. I mean, they can have sharp edges when we
Yeah.
pack whole grains. They do tend to puncture the
Yeah,
bag.
Yeah, even
more
though we've
so
got pretty
than-
thick bags, but at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is we're trying to make an effort to make your grain as fresh as possible.
Right.
You know, at the end of the day. So that to me, the second beer is by far a better beer,
Yeah.
even though it's the older one.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, so can we maybe, since several of us maybe got a flaw on A, can we say this is maybe unconclusive?
It's
Because
inconclusive.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think so.
because we didn't get a clean A. So I mean,
Well, and
everything we know says B should have been a shittier beer. A should have been a better beer.
And that was the whole point when I first brought doing something like this up is let's look at your control beer against, and I really wanted to look at what's the best case scenario. Okay, I bought the grain, it was vacuum sealed versus I came into the shop and I got some grain and it's in a regular grain bag and it's just got a twist tie on it. And I got really busy, so I forgot about it for 6 months, and I found the sack of grain in the garage. Let's do worst case scenario.
Yeah.
You know, I'd like to see worst case scenario versus best case scenario.
Well, I mean,
Well, I've got
exactly
experience with worst case scenario. So I mean, it sat. Remember, our rack used to be right up there in the front of the shop,
right in the sun.
Yeah,
and
and,
right in
and
the
just
window.
a zip tied bag. and that's not zip tied, twist tied bag, and and they would sit there forever, and I would take the recipes home. This was when I was struggling financially and working at the shop, and I'll do
That was a long time ago, dude.
yeah, it was a long time ago. Yeah, and I'd get a free beer, and every time I'd know I better count on this being 60 to 65% efficiency,
Yeah.
and that never happened to me. So now that I pour a larger drink, I do kind of get what you're talking about. I will say that I get that out of English hops sometimes too.
Yeah. Okay.
I see what
I can see that.
I do kind of get what you're talking about now. I wouldn't have been able to pick that out unless you had pointed
This
it
is
out. There.
Challenger hops in Mockingbird.
I believe it's Challenger and
Isn't-
Fuggles and Goldings. I believe.
Yeah,
probably.
Yeah, see, Fuggles, I could see getting something out of those earthy, dirty
yeah,
English hops.
and Challenger.
I get that a little
I think
bit
I've
sometimes.
had it from Challenger
Yeah.
before now, so it could be that too. But
So,
Interesting though.
I thought it was a really cool experiment. Thank
Yeah.
you to Chris for
Yeah.
putting it into
Yeah,
work
for
because
and
sure.
that
for
was,
bringing us beer.
yeah,
Well,
he just brought it down here
Yeah.
and then left.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the beer I'm gonna brew it
Thank
on,
you for leaving.
Yeah. Thanks for leaving, man. On Sunday,
That sounded terrible. Brandon, you're so bad.
I felt like that's what we were saying. Was like it was really great. He brought it and then he just left. It was awesome. Yeah.
Such a dick.
We didn't have to deal with him. He gave us
yeah,
beer.
it's great. So Sunday I'm gonna brew. I'm gonna do a smash beer. I'm gonna use the Planet malts, and then I've got some Motueka
love Planet.
hops. I have some hops that are probably from the first year that Stubby's was in operation.
1934.
They're on the label, I believe 7.3 alpha. They've been in a freezer the entire time, but we know
Okay.
that they're going to have degraded because they're 7 years old.
Now there are hop calculators too, right?
I don't want to talk too much about that, but there is a hop calculator in Beersmith 3 that's told me what the equivalent alpha should be right now. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take Motueka out of the cooler that I believe is 4.3, something like that, and I'm going to
And the 7-year-old example, 7%.
7.3. So I'm going to brew 7.3, and I'm going to hop the 4.3 like
The
I'm
same
using
way.
7.3 to see.
Quantity or IBU?
I'm going to go calculated IBU.
Okay.
So
Okay.
that's my. I want to try and get calculated IBU to be similar, and then we'll try them. And these are things that I'm gonna send to Ward, and Ward Labs. We've talked about them before on water testing, but they do some final beer testing and they do IBU testing. So we're gonna see what the IBUs actually come out to.
Were the hops vacuum sealed and in the freezer the whole time?
They're in like prepackaged ounce packages.
There are hop packs.
No. This is
They're
before we were packaging.
Oh,
hops.
really? Oh,
so these
okay.
are
From
I didn't know
whatever
Motueka was around then. I thought that was a
it was
newer one.
it was actually brand new to the
okay.
shop,
Okay.
and I got a pound of it saved for me,
Cool.
and I whittled it down over the first year, and then these have just been sitting.
That'll be really interesting to look at a calculation of what the IBU should have been, and then just get a sensory evaluation of do we
'Cause
feel like it's
where they
that.
are. Yeah.
Because I know what it's supposed to be, and I know what it probably is now, and then to get a lab data to say, oh no, it's actually this. That's gonna be fun.
Yeah, that'll be cool.
Absolutely.
All right.
I've
Are we
heard-
gonna
we
take
got
a
we got
break?
a really good comment here on Facebook.
Oh, here we go.
Says Austin says earthy dirty English hop is Nigel's nickname.
Is this
Remember
Heish
Austin
or
said that.
Jones?
Jones.
All right. Well,
Oh man.
Jonesy,
sorry, I've got photographic evidence of him playing with himself in the store today.
that actually wasn't him.
Was that you?
No, that wasn't him. That was Tyler.
No, it wasn't.
Yeah, it was. Austin was gone when that picture was taken.
That's too slim.
This is really
Shots
weird.
fired at Tyler
Yeah,
on
it's
that.
really
this is-
weird. Yeah,
we took a really weird turn right
Yeah.
now.
I go out of
Damn.
town for a couple days.
Well,
I come
and
back
y'all
to-
don't even know who it is that you took a picture of playing with
Well, it's in the
themselves. You
background.
have a picture and you don't know who it is.
Well, no, it's one of those. Stubby says that I go out of town for a couple of days. I go to drop off FedEx, and all shit breaks loose in the shop.
Oh, I don't even want to know.
Okay. All right, let's move on to our last thing here. That is our last
No,
thing.
no.
right?
We're
Actually,
gonna,
Mikey-
how about we take a break and then we'll come back and we'll just drink some American lagers.
Yeah.
You don't want to taste the Wild Acre collab beer?
Oh, we have that. Yes.
Yes,
Mikey,
that's what I was
Let's
about
do
to
that.
say. Yeah.
it's
Okay.
you.
So I brought a big growler of this because I want everybody to take a big pour of it and drink a whole cup of it, and I'll explain why as you're doing it. So this is the one we did with Jared with Wild Acre. This is the agave lime. We came
looking
up with
forward
a
to this.
basic structure for it on the show. Mikey wrote the recipe, and I brewed it. It's an extract beer.
That is
So-
going to be a kit available. I will. I now have the final details of this recipe, so it is going to go to Austin.
So basically, it's a blonde with some agave syrup in it.
Holy
and-
shit! It
and
tastes
lime
like
juice.
tequila.
I was wondering who here was going to bring up tequila.
It smells really good.
You remember that?
Oh yeah.
That
My
shit was
girlfriend
awful.
loved tequila.
Wait, what's the?
This tastes much better than tequila.
There's a brewery that's doing. It's a Mexican brewery doing something along that line.
Oh really?
I can't think of what it is.
So the reason I wanted everybody to take a big pour of this is because when I was going to dose it with the lime, I thought I had the lime where I wanted it, and then I had my wife try it,
Next to the
and
coconut.
she says the more that you drink it, the more the lime would build up on your palate. So she thought I had a little too much lime in there, and that was my fear. The first couple times I started blending this, a little bit too much lime just ruined the beer. So I had to
Yeah,
be real soft-handed with the lime.
I think what a lot of people don't realize too is that to me for lime, if you're actually putting real lime in it, the problem is that you get that rindiness, the kind of bitterness.
Right.
You get that kind of, you know what I'm talking about, pithy.
the tangy.
Yeah. Now, so most people were expecting me to put lime zest in this, and I didn't. I squeezed lime juice
that's
out of
what I'm
fresh
talking
limes
about,
and put it in post fermentation, and yeah. So
I still think you get that pithiness. From
yeah, well
lime.
that's the thing is like the lime zest in it rounds out the flavor a bit, and I think helps combat what you're talking about. But because this was such a light-bodied beer, this is really just almost all 2-row with a little bit of Crystal 5, and that's it.
Right. Think about when you make a gin and
Right.
tonic though. You put a crap load of lime in it. It can actually make it even more bitter to me.
Yes.
So
You're right. So I wanted to be real careful with this. So when you first take a taste, you think, all right, there's some lime in there, but I don't know how much. Once you take several drinks and the lime builds up on your palate some, I didn't want it to be too much lime. Like once you get to the end of a pint, you're like, I don't want any more of this. I want this
Right.
to be a several pint beer. I wanted it to be a refreshing springtime, summertime beer that the lime is there, but it's not overpowering the beer.
So your
So
wife saved it for you.
she did, actually, which is rare. Normally, I can't trust her.
Wow,
opinion
shots
on this
fired
kind
at
of
your
thing.
wife.
Yeah, she's just not a beer person.
she's not listening
So
either.
so I get
I'd say that if she was sitting here. She's
I get black licorice from the aroma, the hop. To me, I get a
Really?
like a hint of like kind of a sweet black licorice candy.
Black anus.
to me. This is one that you could serve to non-craft
anise,
beer
sorry.
drinkers at a party at your house,
Oh, they'll drink the hell out of it.
and
Yeah.
they would drink the hell out of it. Yeah, yeah.
And what
Um,
what yeast did you use?
I
Hothead.
do kind of get a anise
Do you know what
aroma.
that-
Anisi.
little
Yeah,
bit.
maybe from the hothead yeast then, because I don't
Maybe.
know what else it would come from. Yeah.
So our original
just a
recipe
hint.
on a all grain system, we initially looked at about a 1060 gravity.
So the base is a blonde.
Yeah,
roughly.
for lack of a
Just
better
a
term.
golden.
Yeah, just a light golden.
We
ale.
I believe we called it 10 pounds of pale, 1 pound of the crystal birch, which is a 5L.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's
then
it.
It's an ounce of Santium at 60. It's an ounce of Saphir at.
You
Did
know
you do
what?
a
That
flame
might,
out?
it might be the Saphir. No, I think it was 5 minutes.
Okay, 5 minutes.
It might be the
The
Saphir
hop.
doing that.
Yeah. That aroma.
That anise
Yeah.
aroma.
So
yeah.
you're
Jared
looking
was
right-
brewing
Like
this
black
beer.
licorice in there.
Jerry
Well-
is doing a completely different version of
Okay.
it. Yeah.
They're doing something along those same lines.
Well, he sent me what they did. Let me
Ish.
pull it
What'd
up.
you say,
believe-
Brock? You
It's
didn't
that like
get
black
it? Or?
licorice, yeah, absolutely, like almost
Yeah,
like a
right?
upper
Yeah.
palate up in there.
I don't
but- and,
necessarily
like-
taste it, but I definitely smell it.
No, it's. I don't get it in the flavor at all. I definitely get the aroma, and I'm a black licorice fan, so I'm fine with it. You know, some people that don't like black licorice, okay, don't smell it, just drink it. it's fantastic beer.
That's what she said.
See, so personally, I don't like agave. When we did this is like a beer I would never brew on my own. So I wanted to make sure that the agave was real restrained.
And you used a
that the-
pound of agave.
Just a pound of agave. Yeah, generally that's how you buy it
It's
at the
still
store.
coming through though.
It's in there for sure.
Iron
Yeah.
mash agave.
Yeah.
That's
No.
I still have my
I
iron
bought
mash agave.
It's Walmart agave.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because that's what I was gonna do for mine.
Actually, the agave was a lot stronger before you put the lime in. So it was pretty good that the agave was as strong as it was because the lime seems to counteract it. The two are opposing. each
5
other.
ounces of lime juice.
Yeah. Now I took limes and juiced them and measured it out, and it.
Would you think this would work with just regular straight up lime juice, rather that you buy at the store rather than?
Yeah. No, it
actual
would. That's
lime?
how I did it at first. When I first kegged it, and I did just like add some in a cup and top it off the beer till I got it right. I did that with a bottle of lime juice that I keep in my fridge just to cook with or whatever, and it worked great. It was no problem at all.
Oh, so you think that might work better, or would you?
It'd be
say-
easier.
Yeah.
I think using a
for
little
sure.
Would it be
fresh
more-
lime
more
peel would
consistent?
even be.
It'd
You
probably
think fresh
be
lime
more.
peel?
It'd probably
It'd
be
take
more
that limey
consistent. I
edge
didn't do
off.
any peel.
No, but Brock, you're saying maybe fresh lime peel.
Yeah,
I know you can't
absolutely.
hear it very well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you get a fresh lime, man. Put the peel in there and take a little bit of that limey cut. Like that's just a little bit over the top, you know.
Yeah, and that's
Okay.
actually what I was shooting for was more of a sharp lime flavor to
Okay.
it. So you're
Did you
right
put
when
salt
you're
in
right when
this?
you say that. No, I didn't, but it would be great with a salted glass, wouldn't it?
You know, it's got that. It's got that lime
I
t-
think I'm tasting
twang.
your water, dude. It's
You
hard
know-
as shit, isn't it?
No, he's got nothing
I
in
have
his
super
water.
soft water.
Oh,
I've
you
got
have super
nothing in
soft
there
water?
except for sodium
Okay.
and
Just
bicarbonate.
salt.
Yeah,
Salt.
yeah.
It's like drinking lemon lime soda. That lingering limey flavor in your mouth.
Right.
That's what you get.
And the lime builds up on your palate, and that's why
we
I
don't want to know what you and Nigel were doing earlier.
I'm just more concerned about Brock wanting to cut me.
I never said I wanted to cut you, Nigel.
I'm in on that.
No,
You said the limey cut.
Because the limey, yeah.
You're one of my favorites, buddy.
You know?
You guys are really being racist towards the limey.
Yeah.
I do think that it's along the lines of what Brock is saying, that if your personal taste were to be that you wanted to soften up the lime flavor some, you could throw some zest in during the boil, maybe the last 15
See, I
minutes
think
of
for
the boil.
me that would be perfect,
and it would soften
I
it
almost
up
don't
some,
like
yeah.
that
Yeah.
that kitchen lime thing.
Yeah, see,
you know?
I purposely didn't do it that way because I did want it to be more of a bright, sharp.
Right.
Man, what's up with your phone, dude?
Yeah, my phone sucks. Chris George is asking a great question.
Yeah, I can't read your goddamn phone, dude.
So
We're old, okay?
Chris George here on
No, it's all broken,
on
dude.
Facebook. Yeah, my phone sucks. It got broken. But he says this is so timely. I want to brew a goza like Otra Vez by Sierra Nevada.
Mm-hmm.
He says not sure how to use the lime. Well, you've now used lime and you brewed a goza today.
See,
so
actually, the flavor in Otravez is kind of what I was going for. Otravez doesn't have that soft kind of lime zesty flavor that would round out the lime. It has more of a sharp and acidic lime flavor to it, like this does.
see,
And
to me, I got we had a couple here in the freezer in the shop, and when we tried it, I got a lot of like lemon lime Gatorade out of that beer.
Yeah, yeah.
which
no,
not in a bad way,
I
like in
think
a
that's
very
the
like
salt.
okay.
I
maybe.
think it's the
salt.
salt in that.
Yeah.
It's the
I like that
electrolytes.
beer.
Electrolytes.
It's what plants want.
It's what plants
it was-
crave. Yeah, that's right.
But he's ultimately asking,
I
not
use
sure how
toilet
to use
water
the.
in this too. Yeah,
He's asking how to use the lime. Though,
Yeah, I
so-
think the answer to his question would be I would do it the same way I did this. Is I would put it in post fermentation and I would just add lime juice. And you know what I did is I took 12 ounces of beer out and I did it a half teaspoon at a time until I figured out how much it was, and then I did the math and added that to the keg.
So you did it the easy way.
We
Yeah, it's
we've
the
talked
easy-
about that before with Mike and Sean and making additions to beers. That's a brilliant way to do it, because once you put that in the keg, you can't take it out. But if you do your small amounts and go, no, that ratio is perfect, do your math.
Personally, I hate that process. I really don't have a good time doing that at all.
Right?
But I do it because it comes out better.
Right.
you know?
It's a pain in the butt, but you're gonna
you
get your
lazy
You only have to do it.
homebrewers.
You only have to
What'd
do it
you
the
say?
first time.
But
But
The butt.
It's a pain on the back butt, not the front
Not
butt.
the front butt. I don't want to
Oh
front
my
butt you here.
God.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
old shit you bringing up.
Right,
there,
that was
man.
my first episode on the show. It was like episode 8. Yeah.
Front butt.
When Jared was still around.
That may have been the Call Me Brewy episode.
that's,
That was it. Yeah, that
Probably
was it.
so.
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
probably the best time for a break right there.
Well, I would say, and to finish up, just answering Chris's question, he said, "Now he goes, what about lime zest and vodka? Doing something like that, doing like a
So typically,
Typical.
here's the thing with when you're using, you can put fresh zest in your boil. Typically, however, what I've found, it's just been my experience. A lot of times when I use zest in the boil, or I get a lot more bitterness than maybe I want. It's
Well,
hard to
you might
control the
not be
bitterness.
zesting correctly either.
Well, that may be true too. So, but what I would say though that this is that if you really want to extract the flavor, from peels, you typically have to put it in the boil, because
Okay.
that's the way you have to extract. It's got the oils in it, and then you got to be able to extract it that way.
And something better than a zester is a stripper. A zest stripper.
Hell yes, I like strippers.
Yeah. So
I wonder where that was going.
right. So if you go to Bed Bath and Beyond,
I've never been to a zest joint. I'm just saying.
they sell what's called a fruit. It's a zest stripper, and I have one. And what it'll do, it's going to pull off the long curls.
Is it called
Okay,
Chardonnay?
yeah.
Well, the-
Kind of like when you go to a
Get it at
bar and you get a
Bartol's,
fancy
yeah.
yes.
The key to zesting is the depth. You
Yeah.
don't want to get into the white pith of it. You
Pith,
really just want the colored portion of the
Yeah.
peel.
and that'll pull.
That'll be the
long
difference
strips.
between the bitterness you're talking about. You won't get
Yeah.
as much bitterness if you just get the colored portion of it. And you could do a tincture like he's talking about. I don't know. I guess that would be a way to do it, to have a measured amount.
I've had good luck with everything except for grapefruit in a tincture. Comes out super, super bitter.
Yeah.
Time there's been.
Real pithy from grapefruit. Yeah.
But I think what you were saying, the long peels, I've had really good luck with that too. I don't know if it keeps the oil more intact, maybe. Or
Oh, that
something
makes
like
sense. Yeah.
That it would keep that, and then
Kinda like chopping
mostly
basil.
in like the last 5 minutes, and then I've even taken it and putting in the primary right afterwards, like just
Yeah. See, I wouldn't be afraid to just throw that right in.
gotten really bright.
Wash
nice,
the outside of the
but
fruit off with
not
some
that
star sand.
acidic, like
Yeah.
Well, wash it. Then you wash the fruit just to begin with to get the waxy coating off,
and wash
and
it with
then-
star sand.
and
you
then
know,
clean it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and then do what Brock. I think that's a great
Well, you're
idea.
gonna
Brock, put
in
it
a
in
boil, I
in the
mean,
primary.
Always wash
yeah.
your twigs and berries.
Wash your twigs
Oh.
and berries.
it's important to have good hygiene when you're brewing.
Yeah.
All right, so I think that brings us to the break.
Yes.
When we come back from the
Very
break, we're going to
nicely.
have a listen and win key phrase. If you're a patron, you should have received an email from Greg recently. We're going to have to change the way we're doing some of this stuff because of Patreon's terms of service. So if you're a patron and you have not looked at that email, go and look for it. Greg sent out some information about that. So we will come back and do that, and we're going to talk about American lagers and light lagers. Should be fun stuff.
Woo woo! We know you want to drink it.
see, it's just throwing me. There's no music going out. Like it's,
I agree. It's really throwing me off.
so yeah, our buddy
We've never
Chris
had
George
music
is
going out.
watching in Canada.
Nice.
So we have Canadians watching.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah, sorry about this one. Yes.
Sorry.
Eh?
Talking about.
Where'd that go? So Greg